Do you think
No,
China's our biggest threat?
there's no doubt because I think when Xi becomes president and premier, uh, China goes from being a strategic competitor to a strategic adversary. We were late to realizing the shift in mindset by China. They were no longer, there's a lot of, that goes into this from the 2008 financial meltdown, et cetera. There's a lot of components to break apart on that analysis. But Xi makes a fundamental change not only about China, but in the relationship with the United States. And we were, hope overcame reason in the sense of understanding that China wasn't not only playing by the rules, but they made a shift strategically, and we were late to coming to the understanding. I think he actually gave us a wake up call, and had he stayed silent or more oblique, we would have lost a decade when we lost really closer to half a decade, maybe just a tad more. And now we're aware of it. I'm not sure we're doing everything to meet it.
President Obama began what is called the pivot to Asia. Donald Trump has continued it. What do you make about that redeployment of American military strength in numbers and in capacity to the Pacific?
You know, I happen to think it's very important militarily. I happen to think our multiplier, we can get into this, is making sure that Japan, Korea, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, the Philippines, all our allies are aligned and pulling in the same direction, both on economic deterrence and on strategic and military deterrence. I don't think, as a father of two kids in the Navy, one full time and one reserve, I don't think it's only about our military. Our economic power, take an example of export controls on semiconductors. They're effective because Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and the Dutch all lined up with the United States shoulder to shoulder. If you think you're going to do it by yourself, you're going to be the odd man out. There's basic pivot here. Our goal is to isolate the isolator China. China's goal is to isolate us. And I think that we have to use our economic strength, our political strength, and our strategic strength to our advantage. Look, even countries that aren't quote unquote allies in the region, they do not want an undeterred, unhinged China. They welcomed America as the counterpoint. And so to me, that's the key thing, and to build on that across each of the spectrums or each of the component parts.
Well, I love the fact you got kids in the Navy. I had a son in the Navy who passed in the hallway with your son in naval
Oh,
intelligence. He just retired about 6 months ago. And then I have a son-in-law still on active duty. And so I'm always hearing about our Pacific deployments. You know about then how important it is that we keep a robust submarine and carrier fleet out there. Do you think we're building for a future to face China, or do we need to rethink strategically?
well, first of all, you always have to think constantly strategically. If you basically have a consensus, there should always be a group of people questioning the consensus. Now, there was a great story in the Wall Street Journal this week. I say great because it underscores something I've been advocating, wrote about when I was ambassador, which is we are not building the Navy and the capacity from submarines to other things, other parts of the Navy fast enough, and the supplies we need fast enough. And that means we got to call on the strengths of our allies, which is I advocated for repairs of the Seventh Fleet that's based out of Japan to be repaired in Japan, keep them in theater, and use the United States power and capacity industrial to build new and additional, and not clog up the system with repair work, which we're way behind on. Second is we have the only part of the world where we have our aircraft carrier permanently based is in Japan in the Indo-Pacific. There's got to be a potential to call on the other parts of both the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force in different ways to think strategically, think about the challenges, and not just Taiwan. You have the Philippines, a sovereign nation and a treaty ally, and the South China Sea is 14% of the world's entire fish catch. 40% of the GDP of the world goes through those waters. And China is trying to change the facts for both for Philippines, Vietnam, and other countries that surround the South China Sea. And so you have to think of it from that strategy as well. The best
Well,
offense is an effective, credible deterrence.
I agree. That's Teddy Roosevelt to Ronald Reagan to the present day. Now, you may have overlapped with Admiral Paparo, whom I have not met, but I love the fact he said
Okay.
we have to make the Taiwan Strait be a hellscape if China attempts to cross it in force. Do you agree with the Admiral?
Well, Poppy is his code name, and I agree with whatever Sam says. I take as face value. He's a very smart and very strategic thinker, as his predecessor, the long Aquilino, John Aquilino, was. I think they no doubt had the part of the credibility of the deterrence on the military side is not only the United States, not only Taiwan, but our allies being part of that and making sure that it is in a, since China has never ever fought a Navy war or a naval led military effort, that they understand the command of the seas is something the United States and Japan and other countries and Australia understand, and we will make it so hard to think about it. That credibility of doubt creates its own deterrence.
I agree with that. Do you believe Xi is ever going to loosen his grip on that country, Ambassador Emmanuel, because he is different from previous Chinese leaders?
Look, I mean, they're shades of each other. He has taken it to a higher level. There is no way he will loosen his grip because of his own sense of protests, whether they were in Hong Kong or when there was housing protests in China itself, in the mainland. There's no way he will loosen in his grip. And look, follow the money. He has spent more on domestic security than he has on his own military security and the projection of that power. That tells you there's three senses of vulnerability in China historically. One around food, one around energy, and the third is around the Chinese people. They live in constant fear of the Chinese people. That is one of their big insecurities. And so therefore there's, based on history and based on culture, no way will the Chinese Communist Party under Xi loosen their grip and control. And I think if you think about COVID, it used to be if you wanted to get rid of a political opponent, or you send them away. The iPhone or the phone, mobile phone, they have now realized how to bring the gulag to you. You can't get on a bus. You can't go shopping. You can't go to the grocery. You can't leave your neighborhood. You can't leave $5 because they know where you are. So the concept, like Russia or the Soviet Union, where you used to send a political dissident to Siberia, the Siberia now comes to you.
That's very well put, and I agree with that. Do you think most Americans understand the nature of the Chinese political system and indeed Chinese espionage in the United States?
I don't think most Americans, and I don't think most of the political class either. So I wouldn't distinguish the Americans. I think our political class on both parties, both things have, we give you an example. Political class, I'm guilty of this also. Sometimes it's used the Cold War metaphor. It's actually wrong, and it leads to wrong conclusions. What do I mean? When we had a Cold War with the Soviet Union, well, Soviet Union and Russia specifically as the anchor of the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, was maybe 7% of the world GDP. We had zero trade. Here we have over $1 trillion a trade. China is close to 20% of the world's GDP, and it is not a military conflict alone. Xi has made sure that the future of the United States battle with China is going to be on science and technology. Why I oppose what President Trump is doing, one of the reasons, not the only reason, is because while they're investing in quantum, while they're investing in AI, while they're investing in biotech, we are cutting our investments in the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, DARPA, and all the other aspects that make up America's scientific and technological leadership. It is a unilateral disarmament by the United States of America, led by President Trump. That is the war that Xi is getting ready for, and we need to play to our strengths in the scientific and technological area, and we are not doing it with the universities system and college system that the United States has built up post-World War II.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.